Joining us now, Mayor Quinton Lucas, the mayor of Kansas City and one of the signatories on that letter to Congress. Mayor Quinton, good to see you. Thank you for being with us. Let's talk about this. It's not the same conversation in Kansas City. The president's not saying that those troops, those forces are there to defend federal property. They seem to be implying that those forces are there to just sort of do what law enforcement would otherwise do in your city.
Well, that's exactly what they're claiming right now, but we have concern, all of us who signed on to this letter, with the fact that there is this ever-expanding and creeping mission. That admission by Bill Barr that they had 200 arrests in 2 weeks, although not true, shows you what the focus really was and what our concern is, that this is to be a substitute policing operation that in many ways is more about politics than it is solving very serious homicides in Kansas City and solving violent crimes for which we often will work with the FBI, U.S. Marshals, and ATF. We all have grave concerns that this is going to exceed what normal, I guess, cooperation is, and instead lead us into a position that may be more like Portland and Seattle, and that's something that no mayor wants.
How do you deal with that, Mayor Lucas? What do you do to make sure that that doesn't continue to happen?
Well, we have continuous conversations with our local United States attorneys, and I will say that both myself and other mayors have stronger relationships with them than we do with the folks in Washington. But I think another part is that we get attention to the issue. The federal government right now is trying to, I think, come in and make this whole discussion of what cities are today. President Trump, when he announced the expansion of Operation Legend, which is happening in Chicago, Kansas City, and Albuquerque, talked about how liberal policies are destroying cities, are killing people. And so we're trying to, in a way, actually just get some sensibility to this, to say that, yes, if we have somebody, an FBI profiler, who's helping us find a serial killer or a murderer, absolutely, that's the sort of assistance we want. But what we don't want are 1,000 agents on the border of our cities that are there to basically substitute for a police department. And what you're seeing in Portland right now, the defense is that it's just to protect federal property. But if you look at any videos, those agents are far from federal properties. Yep. They're actually conducting what is normal policing activity, and it's the sort of thing that is escalating all of those situations.
Other than the publicity of the videos we're showing them right now on the side of the screen, do you have legal grounds to be able to fight this?
So I know that in talking with other mayors, including the mayor of Chicago, Seattle, Portland yesterday, we do think there are legal grounds. I noted this the other day. I'm old enough to remember when a few years ago during the Tea Party movement, everybody was talking about the powers that were reserved to states and localities and bringing all types of challenges against the Obama administration for bringing the FBI in and others into these sorts of issues. We do think that there's that same sort of thing. There are localized and state police powers where you can't just have somebody substitute come in, arrest people, pull them off the streets, and do citywide policing operations or citywide warrant checks, which is something that I know we've been concerned of.
What do you do to answer the president's other accusation? He says, as you said, Democratic-led or liberal. He says Democrat-led or liberal cities are easy on crime and they're letting things get out of control. That's a bit of a dog whistle to some degree, but how do you respond to it?
Well, you know, first of all, the president has gone beyond simple dog whistling to probably like dog barking. He has made it a situation where every battle, even if it makes sense, is something that is kind of loud about progressives, loud about, I think, black leadership in his constant fight with a black woman in Chicago, Lori Lightfoot. And it is the sort of thing that creates a number of challenges. I think what we say is this. Every mayor of any city, who are largely not radicals, we're the sorts of people that often work with or lead police departments, technically, want our cities to be safe, but also want that safety to be aligned with actually good, core, locally based solutions. For example, in Kansas City, they've sent 225 federal agents. We currently have about 61 unsolved homicides this year. If instead of just having folks that are doing any number of operations, we paired up one FBI agent with every unsolved homicide, first of all, we'd still have a lot of people left. But second, we'd actually really have a chance of impacting and denting into our total number of unsolved crimes. I mean, there are better ways to do it. Or if we talked about guns and gun trafficking, the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, should be working on the distribution because there's not a single firearm that is produced in Kansas City or Chicago. Those are the sorts of things that we're looking for from federal cooperation. That's what we'll keep pushing for, I guess, for the duration of this administration and certainly throughout this operation.